Jim, welcome to the podcast, man. We had a great conversation the other week. It's very excited to continue that with you. For people who aren't familiar with you and all the work you're doing, whether that be on, writing a book or the podcast side or even the athlete training side, would you mind filling them in a bit about who you are and all that you got going on?
Oh, good question. Long answer, potentially. The short version is I run a gym called Unbreakable Athletics, coming up on 13 years on the west side of Indianapolis. CrossFit and functional fitness for the adults, sports performance for student athletes, nutrition, mindset coaching, things like that. Host events, charity fundraisers. Been a great time. It was a big transition for me. The first 15 years of my life in the working world, it was finance and investments, JP Morgan, MBA from Purdue. So lived that kind of world and had like a bottoming out like an alcoholic, and that I'm done with finance and I want to make people healthier. So completely switched gears, got different certifications, and then dove in at the end of 2012, early 2013. Fast forward, the gym's going fine, still making people better. Met my wife at the gym, and it's my second wife, so she brought 3 kids to the table, and I did too, like the Brady Bunch. So our 6 kids, ages 19 to 26, 4 in college, 2 are D1 athletes. I got my Alabama rowing hat on, some plays for Ball State football. And so 2 years ago, I started writing a book, and a year ago it published. And then along with that book, called Athlete Builder, the blueprint to build champion athletes, there's a planner that goes along with that. And I launched a podcast 2 years ago. And the thought was, I want to continue to expand my reach before I'm dead and gone. And I can do that by adding more gyms or keep the gym and then do things in another way, whether it's online or in person or clinics. So I have the gym and I have the online version of what I do. And every day just get up, trying to get people better mentally and physically so they could win the days. What is our mantra, whatever that means to them and how meaningful it means to be, for them. So that's where we're at. And I met you along the way. I'm blessed with referrals on my show, and I always ask them for more and more cool dudes. And I got sent your way and met you. So lucky to have you on. And truth be told, right before Thanksgiving, your episode just dropped yesterday. So I'm doing that, and you're doing your thing, and our paths crossed, and I'm blessed,
Yeah,
grateful.
absolutely. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with your audience and hopefully share some good insights for them that way. As you were kind of going over your background, you brought up some incredible, interesting points that way. And first one I really want to dive into is that concept of transitioning from the financial sector into the fitness and performance space that way. I've learned that not everyone who's in this space has started in that space. There's been people, just the other week, I was talking with someone who started as a police officer and now is a Division I college strength and conditioning coach. There's been other people I've met who, they started working in media or content creation or whatever, and then they kind of find their way into this fitness performance rehab space. And, I think it's becoming more common now to see people change careers later in life and change what they're doing and say, you know what, I want to go a completely different route. And this is one area that I'm certainly seeing some growth with anecdotally that way. I'd love to hear more about what that transition was like for you, because I don't think you're alone in deciding, you know what, I want to go from where I'm at right now to a new sector. But I'd imagine a lot of people might have opinions on it when you're telling them about it, right? Like you're like, hey, I'm going to leave my secure job in the financial sector and I'm going to start a gym. I'm sure someone was probably like, Jim, you're crazy for that. But obviously, look at you now. So,
You see that in a lot of ways, right? I think I'm not sure what the number is, but people usually change careers now 5, 6 times. Well, a lot of times they'll still say something close in the industry, but to go something completely different, like I did, is a little bit more rare. And it stems from the fact that I always wanted to be more of an athlete as a kid, and that never really happened. My parents loved me and tried to help me be better, but their forte wasn't, athletics. And I was 6'3", 190 pounds at 14 years old and didn't really amount to much athletically. I ended up playing some collegiate, club level racquetball for Purdue, but that's nothing, that big of a deal. So I go the finance route because I'm good at math and I like solving problems and I like investments, and I was good at getting people better, and that was going great. But I'm playing catch in the yard with my son, Jack, the one that plays football. and I was just fat and out of shape and unhealthy, and we're playing catch, and I asked him, "What do you want to be when you want to be older?" He said, "You want to be an athlete," and I was like, "That's exactly what I wanted to be," and I didn't help at all, and it's something I always wanted to be, so it kinda hurt my identity that he wanted something similar to me, and I wasn't helping him at all like the help I wanted. In addition, I always wanted that for myself. So, did a lot of soul searching. I went through Bowles's book, What Color's Your Parachute? Helps determine what you're looking for, in a career, and he comes out with a new manual every year. So, did a lot of that, and now I'm in my 30s, and so you know who you are a little bit more. So, I'm like, I'm gonna get some certifications, but first, before I even did, I gotta teach myself how to be healthy first, and it was as simple as the P90X in your room, in your living room. Started with that, did some group training, then moved to CrossFit and got better and better, added the certifications. All the while I'm at the bank, I started interning a little bit like some 20-year-old at this local gym that did CrossFit while I'm helping, millionaires become even wealthier during my day job. And I wrote a business plan from a book I took from Purdue's MBA school on how to write a business plan. I went around to some of the folks that were clients and said, "Hey, do you wanna help fund this startup and and put together a loan for me?" And they did that, and I started coaching people out of my garage for free so I could build up, knowledge and experience coaching people, and then it's that whole Cortez's burn the boats where all in or not at all. If I'm half in the financial world and half in running the small business, then you're really not doing either one very well. And I thought if I'm gonna really run something, like running and deciding how to run a small business is completely different than picking publicly traded stocks. Small business is completely different. So I just decided, that end of 2012, early 2013, I'm gonna rent some space. And I went all in there too, 10,000 square feet, where most CrossFit gyms are about 2,000 square feet. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going. And I did. And ups and downs, some really low downs, but some really awesome ups, and 13 years later, it kinda settles out, and you kinda figure some things out, and you're like, "Okay, I probably have a better hold on it now," but it took about a decade.
Yeah, no, and I think you brought up something really essential that I hear from a lot of people when they first get into the space is they start by just gaining experience, even if it means working for free for a short period of time. And I hear some other people say, "Oh, well, you should never work for free and this, that, and the other thing." But by that same token, if this is your first time entering the space and you've never done it before, you just need to get your reps in somehow, some way. And I think the sooner you can do that, the better the rest of the climb becomes, right? Because you've started the process of understanding what you know and what you don't know by literally just doing the thing that you're going to make the new regular thing every day. So I think starting with that comes up a lot, literally just finding a way to get your reps in, right? If you're going to be a coach, like find a way to coach people, regardless of where it is, regardless of what looks like, just find a way to coach. And when you put yourself in motion, you remain in motion. I find a lot of times people like to sit back and contemplate and think about all the things that they could be doing and, write the perfect program and all that. And it's like, no program is perfect for everyone. The sooner you just kind of start and put yourself in motion in that process of coaching, the more likely you are to figure it out along the way, as opposed to just kind of sitting back and hoping it all comes together eventually.
I tell people I love that, I tell people, "Get to about a B minus to a B level approach to your plan and then move forward." Don't try to get to that A. What you wanna do is get moving forward so you can get that feedback loop really quickly. Because I wanna be 10 iterations down the road while you're still on your first, putting together the perfect plan. Because 'cause I'm a lot closer to that perfect plan because I had all that feedback, like, I can make all those adjustments. I'm like, "Get pretty good on your plan, and then move quickly, and then adjust even quicker." That way, you're just so much further down the road, and you're right. As long as you're moving, you're taking in more data, whether it's coaching or learning or whatever, you take in more data that you're just constantly building that part of your brain, that knowledge, that data bank, which helps you evolve a lot faster that way.
Absolutely. No, I could not agree more. In addition to that transition from the financial side into the private sector that way in fitness and training, you also mentioned about being a gym owner, and you've been a gym owner for over a decade. And I talk with a lot of people that say, you know what, I want to own a gym, I want to own my own studio. And we've talk about it quite a bit, and they realize that maybe there's a little bit more to owning a gym than they might think, right? Like, do you rent or lease the space? Do you buy the building? If you do go all in, like you mentioned, starting at 10,000 square feet, that's a big space. What's the strategy for different things, from marketing and client acquisition all the way up to client retention and revenue, like income cycles, and how do you navigate unforeseen circumstances, like, I don't know, a pandemic that forces a lot of stuff to close down? Like, there's a lot that goes into owning your own fitness or performance training studio that way. Would love to hear more about kind of your journey on that side and how you're able to navigate different obstacles and challenges that might have popped up along the way.
No, you're absolutely right. Being a great coach doesn't mean you're a great business owner, and being a great business owner doesn't necessarily make you a great athletic coach. There's some similarities of course, and there's crossover, but it's really 2 different jobs. So the more I coach all the classes, like I'm I've coached enough where I'm above average, I'm decent, right? I can get people better all the time. But if I coach all the classes, the gym probably dies in 12 months. No one's doing the operations, no one's in charge of marketing, no one's doing the sales, right? None of those things happen. If I'm doing all the business work, then the gym keeps moving along, I keep bringing in new folks, then my job is to coach the coaches, right? So the head coach coaches the coaches, but has a lot of other roles. So it took me a long time to figure that out. I thought I'm just gonna coach all the classes, this is gonna be great. The gym will just grow because we're putting out better and better people, and that's not true. You have to let people know. There's still the word of mouth isn't always gonna be there unless it's real negative. So having a goal is nice, but if you don't have the system in place, then your goal is absolutely useless. And my goal of running the gym was nice, but I didn't have a system in place. I didn't have an automatic billing system when people would sign up for memberships. I'd have them fill out a paper waiver. I would tell them what the price was. First of the month, bring me a check or cash, or I can run your card. I was too dumb to even have agreements, right? And so some of the guys that lent me the money to get going, they ran or they run private equity firms, and they go 2 of them were like, "Hey, Jim, just start with the book Traction by Gino Wickman on how to run a small business." And it just asks you all the questions about staffing, operations. So I had to learn that piece in the first 12, 24 months. Big learning curve there. Even though I was getting better at coaching, that learning curve there was so steep that January of 14, I'm not even 12 months in, I'm getting my car repossessed because I'm behind on bills. And I'm like, I don't have the systems in place for this billing. Like, this is ridiculous. And usually January, the first part of the year is awesome because you have those New Year's resolution folks. Well, here in Indiana that year, for some reason, they dumped so much snow, the governor closes the state for a week. So that whole first week of January, those New Year's resolution folks all died. So instead of my business increasing, those folks didn't come in, and the current members didn't come in either. So they're not bringing the checks, they're not bringing the cash on the first of the month. So I'm in big trouble. So come February, March, the 1 year anniversary date, I'm like, oh shoot, that was quick. Might be done already. But I had to learn a few things and make a lot of adjustments really quickly and then keep moving. So it was hard for me in the beginning.
Absolutely, no, and you saying that makes me think of some of the other stories I've heard from people in the space who have gyms or had gyms in some cases, and, some of them didn't make it through the pandemic,
Oh,
unfortunately, or sometimes crazy things like weather happens, right? Like, maybe you own a studio in, I don't know, I was just in Tampa, Florida a couple of weeks ago, and it's like, a year ago, they were hit by a pretty bad hurricane, and a lot of things got flipped upside down. People were leaving and not coming back, and it's like, how do you navigate that as a business owner, right? And to the point that you made, I think a lot of times when people go into business, and I'm guilty of this myself, when I started up in college, is I started this LLC, formed this LLC, and I thought it was better now because I work for myself. But the key there is you still work, right? You're still a very active participant. And at the time, nothing functioned without me there. And
right.
now I see that, in order for business to succeed, in order for it to grow, in order for it to scale to the level that a lot of people have in mind, it cannot be fully dependent on you. What if something happens, right? If you work for someone else, you might have paid time off for sick time, where if things go wrong, you're okay. You can call out and then come back in, and, the whole ship doesn't go underwater in that time. How do you build that for yourself when the business was built around you, right? Like if you miss a day or miss 2 days because life happens sometimes, how do you ensure that the ship doesn't go underwater during that time? And I think the concept of systems and frameworks and understanding how to delegate things, which I am terrible at myself and still learning how to do, and obviously surrounding yourself with the right team, picking the right people to be involved with what you're putting together. I think that can really make or break your success in business that way. But as you mentioned, it's not like everyone in the fitness and the performance or the rehab space for that matter gets this crash course on business that tells them everything they need to know. A lot of them have to figure it out on their own, trial and error, or learn along the way that way. What was that process like for you? How were you able to kind of teach yourself and educate yourself on how to navigate some of these different things that you've learned through experience now by the sounds?
Boy, great question. Another long answer potentially. Okay, so you're right. When it's just you, and there were days when I had, 102 fever, too bad you're coaching. 102 fever and it's July and hot and there's no air conditioning because it's a CrossFit gym, too bad you're coaching. You go 12 months and money's tight, getting your car repossessed, you probably don't have insurance, so you're not going to the doctor, right? These are some reality things, and it's risky. I had some challenges with the financing that I had lined up. The small bank just flat out lied and said, "We're gonna give you the money." Then they said they weren't. So all these problems are occurring. There's also my approach that there's a solution to every problem. And Darwin said it wasn't the strongest that survived or the smartest, it's the one that adapted the best. So the world's changing, you must adapt. You have enough of those ups and downs. By the time the pandemic rolled around in 20, I'd already had so many ups and downs for 7, 8 years. Then when people say, "Hey, Jim, you worried about this?" I'm like, "No." I could shut down for a few months. I'm really humbly not really afraid of much else because I had so much crap that a pandemic is just temporary. We were gonna figure it out. What we did then was we added nutrition coaching. We went and got in that time off, went and got nutrition certification, started working with folks, got coached on how to coach people with nutrition, added a whole new line to our business, thankfully, because you had some time to step back and reflect. But to answer your question, how do you run that? You gotta give up all your likes for the few loves that you have, and my loves at the time, single dad, I got 3 kids, and my dog, and this business, and Jesus Christ. So, got my faith, working on that, pray a little bit every day, go to church most on Sundays, but when I have my kids, about 50% of the time, I gave to them. Other than that, you have to either do it all yourself until you build out a staff. So, at first, I gotta do it all myself and figure out what am I doing here? What's my marketing scheme? What's my plans? So I'm either reading books or talking to other coaches or going to a course. So I'm either all day long training people or learning how to run my business better. And it's drinking through that fire hose, the self-inflicted small business MBA school, 18-hour days for a few years until you cram it all in and you start figuring things out. If you have enough capital and financing up front, it's not nearly as painful because you don't have to learn everything, you pay for everything. So I could bring in a salesperson, I could bring in an operations person. So if you have that, then you can grow a lot faster. The idea is to get to that level because you can't get that far, like you said, on your own doing everything. Jack of all trades, master of none kind of deal. So you start grooming people from within to be the coaches, and then you start learning other things that you either want to do yourself or you offload it with someone else. So I can learn the marketing and sales, or I could pay someone else to do my marketing, and then when they come in, they meet with me for sales. So you got to decide what you're great at. Just do that. Whatever you're good at, have someone else do it who's great at it. Then you'll keep growing leaps and bounds. But once you guys are just trying to do things you're okay at or good at, you'll get stuck and plateau pretty quickly.
And to your point about starting as that individual who is kind of the jack of all trades, I think it needs to be that way from the start because, like I mentioned before, what happens if someone calls out? Obviously, everyone thinks about themselves first, which is totally fine. But what happens if it's one of those people that you're trying to delegate to and something
Sure.
comes up? Is the job just not going to happen for several weeks potentially? Or are you going to step up and get it done? Right? And I think that's the other element that a lot of people don't fully understand about owning a facility or opening a facility is there's a lot of dirty work sometimes that needs to get done. Who's going to do that, right? Who's going to clean the bathrooms? Who's going to take the trash out, right? Things that people don't think about. And they think, oh, well, I own a business now, so I shouldn't have to worry about that. Well, do you have enough coming in to hire out a cleaning company? Because they're not as cheap as you might think. And as you start to kind of dive in, you realize there's a lot more to this than I think people think. And you start to hear some of these different stories from coaches that literally like live in their gym and sleep in their gym because they can't afford anywhere else when they're just getting going. Like it's a interesting space. Now I think it's one that's worth it, right? It's only worth it if you work for it. And this is one that requires a lot of work and effort and commitment to achieve in. But I think it's something that most people, and I'm assuming you're like this, that they embrace that grind and the struggle. It becomes part of their journey towards success that way. And they say, you know what? If I had to, I'd do this all again, because even though there's hard days, even though things aren't always green grass and high tides, it's something about that process of going through the difficult things that makes you appreciate the higher moments that much more.
I 100% agree with that. Even bigger thing for me is that, yes, I go through it all again for the sole fact that the resilience is now built. So to the idea about me being nervous during the pandemic, not saying that I'm not afraid of things or nervous about things. Like, I could recognize there's a fearful moment or that's close to you is diagnosed with cancer, or you have a problem with your business or whatever. But you've been through enough crap. The resilience is now built to the point where you just desensitize and you're like, you know what? I don't care, moving forward. So I do love that byproduct. Did not love the pain required to get to that level, but it is a nice byproduct. Would I do it all again? Yes. Would I do it in the same place? Absolutely not. Now that I'm hopefully a little bit wiser, you put gyms where people want to spend money. So anybody that's a mid or lower level demographic, no gym there, because most people think of the gym as a luxury, not as a necessity, unfortunately. Their health, in my opinion, is a huge priority. Most people don't look at it like that. So you got to put the gym where there's plenty of money, because people will then pay for it, right? And make no mistake, no matter what the gym is, you're selling discomfort. Our product is discomfort and resistance, struggling, sweating. Way easier to sell beer and pizza. Way easier to sell any kind of vice. And I believe me, I love all the vices too. I can't say yes to them very much. But you want to sell discomfort, recognize that smaller niche. If you're in Indiana like I am, it's one of the 5 unhealthiest states in the country. So part of your brain says, hey man, look at all that potential. The reality is, yeah, even though there's potential, the culture is that most people are just big and heavy, unfortunately. Not all of them, but you go to California where people outside at the beach, they wanna look good, they work out. You go to Colorado where they're always downhill skiing or mountain climbing, biking and stuff, people are a lot, health and wellness is more of a thing. So, would I do it again? Yes. Would I be smarter on my location and how I go about it, putting systems in place immediately? Of course, but you don't know what you don't know, so I'm happy where I'm at. I'm 50 years old, still kicking, and I'm gonna keep moving forward.
One of the other things that comes up a lot in this space, in fact, we've talked about it at length with Ray Gorman on the podcast, shout out Ray, is the concept of recurring revenue instead of constantly trading time for money, if you will. And that's something that comes up for physical therapists, for strength coaches, for everyone in the space, really, at some point is at the end of the day, if you're constantly relying on in-person sessions for people to come in, they pay for the session, they train, and then they leave, you're always trading your time for money. Every month you're starting at zero. And you hope people come in, which obviously certain times of the year might be a little bit more stressful. At other times of the year, you might have very high confidence that you've got plenty of people coming in and life is good. Versus recurring revenue is, every single month there's a set amount coming in, right? Like, hey, they've already prepaid for their training this month. If they don't show up, unfortunately it doesn't roll over. They could come in twice one week and 4 times the next. If they're paying for 3 sessions a week, that's fine. But I know at the start of the month that I've got X amount of dollars coming in. And I think having that approach is really essential for business, because now you're somewhat predictable. You know what is coming in, and you can kind of, look to grow that over time. How have you been able to kind of go that recurring revenue route with your business, or is that something that's still maybe developing in relation to your gym space that way?
Well, that's a good question. So we improve what we measure. And if you can't measure anything or you start from zero all the time, it's hard to really, improve it because you're always guessing. Easy ways to do that, you set it up on automatic plans. Even if it's month to month, it's more reliable than just show up on the first and pay. So we've evolved to that where there's agreements where you can go month to month or every quarter or semi-annual or annual. Even better is you lock someone into an agreement, say for 12 months. All right, I'm going to join the gym for 12 months. You probably get a discount whether you pay up front or you pay monthly. The negative is that if they want to quit at some point, say 6 months in, how do you handle the 6 months they already paid for? So that needs to be in the agreement as well. It could be, hey, you're quitting, too bad. You get nothing back. A lot of times what gym owners will do is they'll say, all right, whatever is the balance, let's say it's 6 months, you'll get half. So the person that's quitting will get half of the 6 months back, and the owner gets the other half of the remaining balance, and that's how you part ways. So you have to, agree on that. It's gotta be locked in, but even then, people can always dispute claims. So that could be ups and downs. If you're at the bank's hard to leave. It's like a big marriage. You get your checking account at the bank, who wants to change all their checking accounts and all their auto pays? So you're really locked in. You get a mortgage with the bank and your checking account, bang. You got your investments there or a trust that's being held by the bank. You're at that bank for a generation. So to your point, that kind of business model is outstanding. To do that in the health and wellness space, it's a lot tougher. So when we bring on a sports team, we wanna know, "Hey, we're gonna be here for X number of months. Here's the agreement, pay it up front, we're good to go." So as much as you can, but, people their habits change, they get finicky, they don't wanna be healthy anymore, they don't care as much, or maybe they just move. Maybe they take a different job or life happens and they're down some income, things do happen. So there's a little bit of that, but also, if you're just always trading your time for someone else's time, you gotta have that ROI be higher than your cost. So if I believe I should be earning $100 an hour and I'm coaching folks, then you gotta make sure you're getting at least $101 back per that hour. So if I'm doing some private lessons, maybe I have 2 or 3 athletes coming in, each paying $50 so that I'm making 150 for that hour to net out to a positive occurrence. Not always gonna be like that, but that's what you're striving for.
And I think once you solve that revenue problem from a business standpoint, everyone sleeps a little better at night, right? So a lot of coaches, again, they've contemplated going into the private sector and possibly, starting their own facility. They finally do it. They make that jump. They put in their time, their effort, and energy. They start to figure it out from a business system standpoint, and they've got money coming in recurring to the point where they can cover their bills, both in a business sense and a personal sense. Everyone's paid for and accounted for, and things are looking up. And I think the next element or evolution of that you brought up earlier as well is that concept of leaving a legacy, right? Like, how do I have the greatest impact? Because especially in the fitness, performance, rehab type sectors that way, I don't meet a lot of people that are in it exclusively for the money. Now,
Mm.
if they get wealthy along the way, they're not going to complain about it. But a lot of them get into this because they like to help other people. They want to lift others up. They want to spend their life helping others to improve their own. And I think that there's something really powerful and impactful about that concept of leaving a legacy, right? Something that carries on and continues to help others get to a higher point in life. And you mentioned you did that through a number of different ways, whether that's your podcast or the book that you wrote and released, and potentially looking to expand on the gym side of things that way to have the ability to impact people in other areas that way. Would love to hear more about how you have gone about building almost a system, kind of like your business, in relation to leaving a legacy that will carry on, for years and years and years, indefinitely, even after, time on earth might end.
Well, huge question, and I love it because I feel called by Jesus Christ to create the best version of myself and help evangelize and create the best version of other folks, and that's my calling, if you will. if I can make a positive impact that way, when I'm dead and gone, then there's that ripple effect, right? So a number of ways. First, having a profitable gym, if you can make a ton of money, the reason that's awesome, because whenever had my best years, that's when I bought more equipment. That's when I expanded the services. So, yeah, you have an ROI that's higher, but if you reinvest a bunch of that back into the business, then the product and service that everyone else is receiving is that much greater. 2, you start with your own family and friends, and so the model that I have, like, you come to the gym, you're trying to get healthier physically, but if I'm looking at any athlete, there's their mindset in their head, which governs everything. It's their core values, how they, uh, handle issues. If I can get their mindset better, when I'm dead and gone, they can use that to manage everything else. There's a knowledge of how do you eat better. There's a knowledge of how do you train better. There's a knowledge of how to of anything. If I can inspire and move them there, they're gonna be better. How about being a better teammate, right? Being coachable, but willing to coach others, receive the hard coaching. If I can move the needle there. So those 3 areas all I lump together in the athlete's head, and I'm trying to push that hard with everybody, especially when I'm dead and gone, especially the mindset, because that governs everything. Physically, it's pretty obvious. Can I get someone better with their training, their nutrition, and their recovery? And so I'm always trying to get people to follow that. I love the movie Dead Poet Society, that approach where you ask questions and you question things and not be so robotic about the world. So your squat is stalling halfway up. What's the problem? I don't know. Well, you can't finish it, then it's probably you're not squeezing your glutes. Or if you're falling forward, your core and back are too weak. We got to constantly look for what the issue is in the weight room, and it trains them to always look for the limiting factor and the issue and everything else, whether it's a relationship, solving a math problem, or something at work. Constantly look and ask those questions so you can solve the problem and adapt and evolve, just like Darwin said. You the one that adapted the best. I'm constantly wanting to get them to question things, find the root cause so they can devise solutions, and they have the habits of time and consistency, whether it's in the weight room or the math problem or the relationship, so they can keep moving forward and solve that problem, and that's how you just keep building the best version of yourselves, and that's how I go about doing things.
And I think part of it too is it's not just the legacy that you personally leave through your own work, but also the legacy that you leave, in your case, through your children's work, right? Like you mentioned before, one's a D1 football player and one is a Division I rower. Those are no small feats. It's very difficult to make it into collegiate sport from high school, let alone make it to the Division I level. I'm sure you've got the stat in your book, but I think it's what, like 2% or something like that? Like,
Yeah, so,
so
6 to 7 play in college, only about 2% play D1.
right, so it's a very, very small cohort that just make it to the Division I level, let alone you mentioned before we got on that your son just played his last game at Ball State senior year, right?
Right.
Like, to play all 4 years of eligibility at a Division I collegiate level, I'd imagine that 2% gets even smaller from there, right? Like, it's a very limited pool that we're talking about here, but you've done that not just once now, but twice through your kids that way. And I often talk with Division I athletes themselves. I don't always talk with the parents of Division I athletes, but I'd love to hear more from you about how, you were able to kind of see greatness unfold in the raising of your children that way, right? Like, when did you know that they were going to be Division I level athletes? Like, was that something that was always known and determined and expected? Did they kind of come to that conclusion on their own? Or I'd just love to hear more about that process of raising a D1 athlete times two.
So, my 3 always played sports, but Jen's did also. She has 3 girls, and they're very athletic. They're just a little short, and there takes a body type. So Jen's kids very athletic, and, some are really decent at sports. My 3 were always into it. I guess when you have sports shows on at a young age, but Jack, my youngest, always wanted to play, no matter what it was, wiffle ball. So, Jack, my oldest, so that was always his MO, play sports, do well, play sports, do well. Never wanted dad coaching, unfortunately, hurts your heart a little bit, but that's okay. And when your dad opens a gym at 10 years old for him, well, and my other 2 were 8, they grow up, they're nurtured with the gym is just something that you do 4 or 5 times a week. You come in and squat, you do push sleds. Being athletic is kind of the standard now. Versus growing up, my dad was very overweight and unhealthy. The standard was not struggling, not running, not being healthy. So if the standard is, hey, we're going to be healthy and push, that gets a lot easier. Being 50 and you grow up and you see kids playing sports like CYO or rec league, the best ones made it to the all-star team, and they got a few extra weeks of practice and games, and those were usually the best athletes. Those are the ones that played in high school, and the best ones there went to college. Now everyone plays who's decent at all. I mean, by decent, I mean like a C-level athlete plays travel ball, so it has to be the one that adapts the best again, right? If everyone's playing travel, but no one lifts, no one does the strength and resistance training, well, here's the limiting factor that no one's working on. So I just go to my kids and say, "Hey, no one's working on this. You keep playing travel ball, you keep doing all-star sports, whatever, but if you just lift and no one else does, you're gonna win because you're doing something no one else has." So it gives you the competitive advantage. Right out of MBA school, what is your competitive advantage? Figure that out. So if you guys do this, so my kids grew up lifting all the time, so when it came time to do well in high school, they did well. So Jack was always looking to play football from the get-go, want to play in college from the get-go, and he comes out during COVID. Horrible time. So what does that mean? You come out during COVID, no one can visit D1 schools, 0. You can only visit Division II, Division III. Also, they're giving everyone else an extra year of eligibility, so 6 years total. So there's no need for an incoming group of freshmen because the current crop all gets an extra year. So instead of offering 25 scholarships to incoming freshmen in football, they offered 12. So Jack had to walk on, work his ass off in the weight room, and then prove himself on the field. Then he earns a scholarship now as an athlete. My daughter, who is, arguably less athletic, and she'd tell you that she is, rowing doesn't quite need that. You need to be tall, you have to be strong, you have to be willing to suffer is the rowing deal. So she's at Alabama for an engineering scholarship in academics, and she likes rowing, and when she was here at home, she would train, and my wife would say, "Hey, you're pretty good at this. You might wanna check that out." So I knew an Olympian. It was on my podcast, and I had her come by and said, "Hey, you want you to work with Maddie a little bit on rowing?" So she did, like, after her junior year and kept working with her, and Maddie is good at suffering because she's been in the gym her whole life. So when she goes back to Alabama, she goes, "I'm just gonna walk on and just see how it goes." And then she makes the team because she was strong enough and, was willing to suffer, and that was her competitive advantage, and, so she made the team. So completely different paths. She was already in school for a number of years before she decided to be an athlete. Jack was already like that from the get-go. So, if you find your competitive advantage, then you can win. If you're always like everybody else, then you're just like everybody else.
On to your point on the competitive advantage from lifting that way, I think a lot of times people, athletes, I was like this when I was young, right? You hear the concept of the gym and training and lifting weights, and you just think, oh, it's to get bigger muscles. And at the time, when I'm in middle school, high school, I don't fully understand it. So for
Sure.
me, I don't fully understand, like, why do I need bigger muscles if I'm playing soccer? Why do I need bigger muscles if I'm playing baseball, right? Like, is it just to look good from an aesthetic standpoint, like, that sort of thing? But like, I think the more you dive into it, the more you kind of help them to see the value in those actions. It's not just building bigger muscles. It's not just looking better aesthetically or something like that. It's also, hey, we are now more forceful. We can generate more force. So if we're playing football, now we can knock someone on their rear end that maybe we couldn't otherwise, right? Sure, you can also generate force faster. So now I'm not just getting to a higher total force output, but I can get there faster than everyone else, which gives me a leg up on my competition, right? That also helps carry over into things that require a lot of force, like sprinting, and not just generating high amounts of force, but generating them quickly. On top of that, I see so many middle school, high school athletes who face injury, and a lot of those injuries play very detrimental long-term effects at their overall ability to engage in sport, right? Like, let's take ACL, for example, since I feel like everyone talks about it. And despite all these different improvements that we've made and all these different efforts that we made to improve our outcomes there, the whole 1 in 3 concept statistically still holds true, that 1 in 3 will not be back to their prior level of function in competition, which again is too high in my opinion. But if we could possibly reduce the likelihood of that occurring in the first place, or if it is unfortunate enough to occur to you, how can we ensure that you get back and you're just not part of a statistic, right? Like, we want you back to where you were before and then some. We want you to come back stronger, faster, bigger, whatever, than you were prior to injury, because obviously prior level of function was not enough. And if you go into that already being strong, already having a training IQ and an exercise IQ, that whole process just became significantly easier, because now it's, we get to this point where I don't have to teach you how to squat under a bar for a first time. It's just, how do we make that second nature again, as opposed to literally trying to learn all these things for the first time ever. So I think the concept about training, especially at a young age, and making that part of the non-negotiables is absolutely huge. And I think a lot of the things that develop from it too are non-negotiables for D1 athletes, right? Your mindset, your relationship with doing things that suck sometimes, because it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Some days are kind of downers, but if you've done hard things for a decade plus, then it's second nature to you at that point. And I think a lot of those lessons that you can get from training at a young age, you can't get them from anywhere else. So I love the concept for many reasons. And I think as long as you can articulate to the young athlete why it's important to them, because again, I was just dumb at the time and I didn't fully understand it. I just thought it was just like, hit some curls and go off and hopefully look a little bit better with that bicep pump, right? Like, I think the more they understand it, the more, I hate the term buy-in, but the more bought in they'll be.
Sure. That's absolutely it, and when anyone is bought in, then everyone's working a little bit harder because they believe in what they're doing, and to get a younger kid, whether it's a 10-year-old like Jack or even junior high, which is, quite young, and then high school is still, honestly young about being serious about training, I can tell them these things. Their eyes have probably glossed over in the first 60 seconds if I start giving them all this stuff, and I said so what I did is I wanted to paint a picture for them, and I just grabbed these 2 lacrosse balls, and I was rolling one in one direction slowly on the table, and I took one of the exact same lacrosse ball, and I would roll it much harder at the first, and they would collide, and the one that was moving faster would hit and then still move forward a little bit. The one that was moving slowly obviously absorbed the force and got knocked back. And I would tell the kids which athlete was winning that battle, and they said, "Well, obviously the one moving faster, the ball moving faster." I said, "Why is that?" And Maddie was like, "That one's stronger." I go, "Well, yeah, kinda. It's exerting more force. It's more powerful." So if you wanna exert more force and be more powerful and as an athlete, that's the way you can win. When you're exerting force into the ground to propel yourself or against an object like a bat or a ball that you're throwing, that's, winning is what the goal is. That's the carrot. The stick is that now you're exerting force. Your body has to be able to do that. It's the machine that exerts the force, and your body is growing and trying to do it, but it's also getting damaged sometimes by doing it. So if you build yourself up to be able to exert and receive force, then you're probably less likely to get hurt. And if you do get hurt, your chances of winning not very good, right? You still can, but not as good. So one, the stick is getting hurt. So you want to be the athlete that can exert force and absorb force. The winning, the carrot, is exerting more force and beating your other opponent. So I just try to show them that example of the balls smashing into each other. And all along the way from that point on, you got to provide context. So you get, here's why we're doing box squats. Here's why we're doing jumps. Here's why we're doing pull-ups, right? So you're constantly telling them why. At some point, they'll just say, "Hey, Jim, I don't care anymore. Just tell me what to do." They have that level of trust, but it takes a long time to get there. So until you have that level of trust, you're constantly telling them why so they understand. And it's exhausting, but it's part of the deal. But once they buy in, like you said, man, let's go. It's super easy.
Absolutely. And I think one of the other key elements about that concept of buy-in is ultimately the success of the athlete is up to the athlete themselves, right? A lot of times, I think I've seen some coaches who believe that they are the sole reason and purpose behind an athlete's success. And I think success in athletics is very multifactorial. And even if you put together the perfect program, even if you check in with them weekly, if they still decide, you know what, I'm not doing this, if they skip reps, if they miss days, if they sleep like crap and don't eat anything, like, there's still so much control in the athlete to derail that train or keep that train going on the right path. And I think ultimately an individual's success, at least in the athletic space anyways, is largely due to their own decisions and own abilities, not necessarily just what the program that the coach wrote for the day was. And I think a lot of times we can very easily find ourselves in this trap of thinking, oh, well, I'm the reason that this happened. And it's like, unfortunately, that's not the case. The athletes are really the ones that are steering this, right? Like, they have their own ideas, own intentions. You can guide them, but ultimately they're going to take the steps that they choose to take along the way.
Yeah, you couldn't be more right again. It's not really a good podcast for us if we're always agreeing with each other, right? There should be some kind of conflict. So you can take a kid and push them, or an athlete and push them, and they'll go so far. Or you can take someone and not help them much at all, but they're always over executing and they go far. And if you ever can combine both, you're pouring into an athlete, and the athlete goes above and beyond, then you have a Hall of Famer like Peyton Manning, right? So, yeah, you can legislate, we're doing all these things, and that helps, but it's the athlete that takes the approach like Urban Meyer says, where it's everything you do plus 2. You don't run 2 line, you run through it. If we're saying we're doing 10 reps, we're probably trying to do 11. So, if someone's brand new, they don't know what they're doing, and they just go get a men's fitness magazine and follows the sets and reps there really hard, and they train hard with intensity, they're gonna do great. And I can go to Louis Simmons, who before he passed away, and have him write the perfect program for powerlifting, and you show up and don't do much, you're gonna be dog shit. I remember we had Shane Sweat running a clinic with us on strength building, and he was telling us about he's over in Dubai, tons of money there, as a rule of thumb, and the guys were coming up to him and says, "Hey, I'm taking this much testosterone, this much, um, you know, s anabolic steroids. How come I'm not getting stronger?" And he goes, "Well, what does your training look like?" And he said, "Well, we work out once or twice a week, but we just keep taking the drugs, so we're not doing much." He's like, "Well, yeah, you're having all this stuff pumped into you, but you're not doing anything with it." So, to your point, yeah, the athletes could be great and get pretty far on their own, and the coaches could be great and get the kids dragged along on their own. But if they ever come together where the athletes pushing and you have a capable coach, man, look out, because they're just going to do all the things, not just the minimums, not what the average or not what the above average people are doing, what the elite level people are doing, because they're doing all the things.
Absolutely. I could not agree more, Jim. I realize we could probably continue the conversation all day long that way. We mentioned your book and your podcast several times throughout this episode. For people who want to find out more about those things, find out more about your gym, and keep up to date with y'all online, where can they find you at?
Awesome. So the gym is Unbreakable Athletics Academy. It's located on the west side of Indianapolis in Plainfield. You can go online, look up Unbreakable Athletics, um, whether it's on the website, Instagram, TikTok, X, Facebook, you name it. The book is called Athlete Builder, the blueprint to build champion athletes. The planner, that's a 3-month planner that goes along with it, helps you implement what the book teaches you. It's called the Champions Planner. All that's found on Amazon. You can find the book also, Barnes& Noble, things like that. The podcast, also called Athlete Builder, I bring on college and pro athletes, doctors, trainers, special forces, nutritionists. I ask them, "What do you guys do to build those 6 things? The 3 for the head, 3 for the body." So every week I get hour or 2 of continuing education. Uh, this Every 2 months I do a free webinar. The second or the first webinar, and it's all on helping people prepare for 2026. For those folks that have fallen off the wagon, or you're looking to evolve through a plateau, uh, you go to the athlete-builder.com website. You can go on, look at the stages and sign up for the webinar. If you've done 75 hard, which is a great challenge, but it's not built to be something that's sustainable, I'll have an option for you that's all free, but it moves you along for the next 90 days on something that's more sustainable. So that webinar, I put out a webinar every 2 months, and the first Tuesday in December is going to be our next one. And so that should be a good one.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Incredible to hear. We'll link to all of that in the description below too. If you didn't quite catch it, you can just click there, see everything Jim and his crew are up to. Jim, is there anything we missed as we were chatting today, or anything that we didn't get into that maybe you wanted to?
Um, Nothing that we really missed. I could talk shop all day long. I'm grateful that I met you and that you and I are working to make an impact on others. So I'm grateful for that. So I want to make sure I express that. I would say that that Dana White comment that if you're just a tiny bit savage, you're gonna be so much further advanced versus the world. I would say you're only here once. Like, you really are. You're only here once, whether you're making an impact on other people's relationships or your own life or your spirituality or your job. But if you're only here once, man, find some things you really wanna do and move forward quickly. Find things that you're terrified of and just move forward because 'cause you're probably just gonna be just fine. Every time I've tried that myself, I've always ended up just fine. Didn't always win, but ended up just fine and learned a lot. So get out and be uncomfortable. Put your phone down and get uncomfortable. Find some relationships and build on those and get out there and get after it. You're only here once. Find a job that has meaning to you and be uncomfortable. Like, it's really a great place to be when you're doing things that you thought you couldn't do. So go out there and push.
Yeah, absolutely. I could not agree more. I think that's a great series of takeaways to close out on, Jim. This is an incredible conversation. I really appreciate the connection we've been able to form and looking forward to continued discussions with you, man.
Oh, appreciate you too, Dan. I really enjoyed it. Thanks so much.